All right, everybody, you know what time it is. N-words on three. It's got to start with an N and end with an R. What's up, my neighbors? Hope everyone's doing well out there. Welcome back to From Rhythm to Algorithm. Rhythm regulates expectation. What were you expecting me to say? What did you say? Maybe you're a racist. but what it does, I don't know. Try to make an intro that's edgy. Catch 'em with almost racism. But anyway, you know what we do here. Linguistical derivation. We prove the consistency of sound. Of course, you learn Spanish, English, French, Russian, whatever languages. But the actual what is fundamental is the sound and the sequence of sound, the order of the sound. In the same way you play through a musical key, it matters on the order, but you're playing the same notes. A language is the same sounds, just the order is different. And so it's very apparent if you go watch anybody talk about language learning, if you go watch one of these channels like World Friends or World Languages, you know, they'll bring a bunch of people from different cultures or different, speak different languages. They'll all kind of like converse. Most of the content is in English, but they'll say stuff like, I'm forgetting my native language. Do I even speak Portuguese? And it's really because everyone's just becoming aware that you learn the syllables. You do speak other languages, but language is not fundamental, sound is. The syllable is what is fundamental, not the word itself, and certainly not a language. But rhythm does regulate expectation. Trying to start a little intro, I don't know. But picking up where we left off, so we've proven the consistency of sound. We've demonstrated all of these different facets in nuance within language, or pointing out empirical evidence, providing analysis, trying to derive what is sensorality. Sensorality, right, is anything that you censor. It's the most general form. It's just a word that encapsulates anything that would be required. Censorship, sentience, senses, sensory, and so we're showing a bunch of different facets of that. Sensorality with an S is anything that's sentient filtration. Sensorality with a C is anything that is inanimate filtration, such as a coin separator. If you put a quarter, a nickel, or a dime in an old school mechanical coin separator, it can separate it based off, it can filter it based off its weight and size. So that would be a sensor with a C. And so last episode we finished, I don't know where we finished, but I pointed out, right, I just said it right. Like this word that we say is right. And I pointed out, so my last episode, I did an episode in language litigation integration about copyright law. And so this was very interesting to me. And so, because I said we have to do first principle science in the 21st century or at any time, you have to make a differentiation or progress logic at the most basic fundamental level. And so when people say right, all right, if I say the opposite of left, you would say is right, R-I-G-H-T. If somebody says, am I correct, you would say you're right. But right there is like, I don't want to say an adjective, but it's like validation. It's not a, right? Right is a direction. If you say somebody is correct or somebody is right, you're validating that, but it's like almost like an adjective. Like if I said the sky is blue and you said right, you're kind of, again, you're validating what I'm saying as valid or as true. But if I were to ask that and I say, the sky is blue, right? And I'm eliciting confirmation, I'm eliciting agreement. But when you say, I have rights, I have a constitutional right, or specifically, I have a copyright, right? They'll spell that C-O-P-Y-R-I-G-H-T. And they'll say, well, that's your legal right to have distribution of this intellectual property. But then what is copywriting, right? If you copyright something, it's clearly linguistically built on the function of writing, and so you have copywriting, and you spell that C-O-P-Y-W-R-I-T-I-N-G, right? So copywriting produces copyrights, the right to have a copy, the right to distribute a copy of a piece of intellectual property. And so copywriting is spelled correctly, and then they say copyright is R-I-G-H-T. That's incorrect. That's not right. And so, but additionally, even more nuanced, or not even nuanced, more direct, is the correct question would be is like, why is a constitutional right or a humanitarian right, when you say something like that, again, it derives from ritual, but why is it so intimately related to the act of writing? And clearly it is linguistically. I mean, that's why when you write something, W-R-I-T-E, right, when you say something in person, if I say write the direction, write you are correct, or write your legal standing or your legal ability to have agency or autonomy or decision or whatever you want to call it, a right you don't spell it out. You don't say WRITE or RIGHT. So it's very apparent, but you're saying three different things: validation, direction, or innate ability to do something. And so then when we write it down, right, the difference you make when you say writing as an action, as a verb, is that W, right? It's a silent letter. But you're linguistically differentiating writing from having constitution. I just using constitution as but humanitarian rights, common law rights for being an organism, for being an autonomous being. That's what you're differentiating linguistically, is with that W, is writing, the act of writing, versus your inherent ability for agency. But now a correct question, or a question, an actual open question, or something that could be researched on more or develop more logic, is why is writing, your inherent ability to agency, intimately related to the act of writing it down? Because certainly people would have the intuition and experience of wanting rights before writing. And so it's like, the chicken or the egg in that sense. What came first, the rights or the act of writing? It's certainly the act of writing. Right, we went through the chicken and the egg thing a while back. And so, but that is very new, or it's not even nuanced, it's direct. Like that's what the silent W is when you write the word writing down. But copywriting, RIGHTING, isn't a thing, right? And so, right, that's just, again, like people haven't rigorously articulated three different use of the words write, as is today. And so when people are like, oh yeah, science is all done, and then like literally the physicists at Caltech and Harvard and IAS and all these different schools will be like, back in, 1890, when they thought the only thing left to do whatever scientist, big historical thing, physics is done besides these little nuances. It's like we haven't even differentiated what's right and wrong. Like literally we don't know what the word right means. Like we haven't even differentiated that, or no one's articulated that. But I have, haha. And so copywriting produces copyrights, and anytime you're initiating or saying I have this agency, you're talking about an RITE. And that's why you have writing with a W in front of it. But then the right question is, why is writing things down related to your inherent agency? Sensorality, sensoricity. What is soricity? Soricity, orificity. Again, just connecting language to other, right? We know what an orifice is. We talked about orifice, oral, the base of orality, which is the base of sensorality. This vocalization. And so soricity, again, just using every linguistical form of sensorality that can be used in all of its context to establish its meaning. Sensorality is factuality. Sensorality is actuality. Actuality is reality. Real, sealed. Sensorality seals the deal. Speciality steals. Stealing is taking. So now here we have another, again, I don't know if I'm breaking down the word, expanding the word, what exactly, if we're in this forward or contracting part of the proof. Like if I take the word take, and I want to generalize that. Very clearly with any word, anybody, no debate, if you want to generalize a word, you put A-L-I-T-Y at the end. Ality, quality, sensorality, tableality, skyality. But these words, these very simple, these very frequent words, these very fundamental words like take, right? If I want to make that plural, how do I put the A-L-I-T-Y on it? Well, instinctually, I'm going to take off the E and just add the A-L-I-T-Y, right? And we've already axiomatized, but it's not even literally publicly known anywhere besides me, is right, specialty. Speciality is special with an I-T-Y at the end. And so we're showing that connection of that A-L to the I-T-Y with sensority, sensoricity, just trying to get to that final form. But how do we, if I take the word take and put ality at the end, takeality, it looks really funny. Like you never see that word or you never get to that word. Why? And so I think it's just, again, because when these more fundamental words, these more frequent words, it's like their definitions are more solidified. Right? Again, if you have these range words where it's like they apply to a lot of different contexts, and again, all words are defined relatively based on their use with other words. So the more frequently it's used, the more solidified or more stabilized its definition. Right, you'll never see takeality, right? Time, right? Timing, time. Make that as general as you can. What is it? Timeality? And so you've never seen that word. So like what's going on there? Like why? There's very clear words where it's obvious, right? If I have scent, I don't, truly just a random word, scent, like my smell, my sense of scent. And I said scentality. I don't have to change anywhere. The T's right there. The syllability pairs up nicely. It's just like a building block. You just plug it right in. And so what are these words where we have to take off a letter or modify a letter, such as time or take, where we take off that E and we add ality? And then why don't we see those forms of words? I'm really certain it's just based on the frequency of use, just more solidified. All right, I think so. But then we connected sensorality to conic, and conic section, conicality. But conicality, comicality. Sensorality is comical. Sensorality has a sense of humor. Comedy, parody. Speciality, parodies. Stories, parodies. How do parodies relate to stories? All right, what's a parody? You mimic somebody, you make fun of somebody, you make light of somebody. It's kind of like a mockery. I would say the most operative word to parody is mockery. A story, it could be a mocking story, but story obviously doesn't have that connotation. So a parody can be a story. Not all stories are parodies. And keeping there is no mutual exclusivity. Logic is directional, and logic is unique. Parody, jeopardy. Jeopardy is danger. Speciality endangers. Speciality jeopardizes. All right, last time we said, right, regroup, reset, recategory. That's the same form of the word. Because like you would say recategorization, you would say recategorize, but you never say recategory. Right? So you have a category, a set, a group. Like the same form or function of those words, as opposed to, because people might have said, well, you do say recategorize, right? You don't say resetize or regroupize, right? And so it's like you have to keep the same form of the words for some sort of this analytical process. Because we're at the point where it's a lot of this stuff, or like I said, at the end of a proof, you literally just feel like you know nothing. You just feel like because you literally are. Like I'm literally forming these new words, or proving these steps. And so you feel like you know nothing, but yeah, just moving forward. But so we related it to cone, and then we have concavity, right? And then we have this proven thing where it's if you have any group, any set, well, sets are set, but any group or anything that's dynamic or can change, doesn't really matter for here. But any grouping, any collection, any rule set where you have exceptions, like that's not, you've somehow structured that question or that grouping, that categorization wrong. And so concavity, right? You'll have concave up and concave down. What that tells me is we've not defined concavity correctly, because you wouldn't have adjectives around it. And so con, obviously the prefix there is kind of like typically just as is without. And so cavity is a hole. And so concavity, what is that word referencing? With cavity, right? In Spanish it's with. In English it's typically used as a negation prefix or negation. So concavity, right? If I have a bowl, right? Concave up, a parabola like this, the vertex down here and my function mapping going up here. Like I said, it's concave up and concave down, which immediately pairs to equilibrium, stable and unstable equilibrium. Right? A particle on a concave down manifold is going to be at an unstable equilibrium point. Point being is that if you have concave up and concave down, you've done something wrong in your categorization. And so cavity is very well defined. It's the absence of matter. It is a hole. A cavity gets bigger the more you take out of it. But concavity, again, you're describing the shape of the manifold, of the substance, of the environment. And cavity is without. So something on there, definitely there's not, concavity has not been described properly. And yeah. But a cone, right, a chord is different than a cone. So we have cone, chord, and what's the other one? Core. So all of these kind of like fundamental words. It was a big step in speciality as well. All right, we know what a cone is. A conic section's a slice of a cylinder. So a chord is cylindrical. Right? If you think of a chord, you're thinking of something that's a cylindrical shape, a string. A string is a chord. Sensorality is cylindricality. Conic, cylindrical. Speciality is cynical. Sensorality, cynicality. Sensorality limits cynicism. The opposite of cynicism is optimism, not pessimism. Optimism is optimal. Optimality, minimality. And so again, this function of opposition in language, right? Because if you said the opposite of opposite Opposite of optimism is pessimism. But then what's cynicism? And again, all of these word forms, like it's not like I'm sitting here, like these word forms come to me naturally. And so I'm showing you these relationships. I can't really break down my own personal intuition. But this opposition function, and because remember, we need 3 words to define define an axiom or define any word. So it's like this love triangle of logic where it's like you have natural opposites, but they have other natural opposites to keep the system open, to be allowed to build on it. Again, something going on there. Chronological, alphabetical, right? Alphabeticality is chronological. It just is. And so I haven't really rigorously demonstrated. Oh, I mean, all of this is demonstrating all of these things. But right, the alphabet is in chronological order, and chronology is dependent on time. So how does the alphabet relate to time? And you might say, well, it's in, like, you might not even have thought of that, right? What is the time dependence? Is it present or not present? Does it exist or not exist for letters, for language? And of course it does, because language progresses over time, right? Before there was any human beings, there was no words, and now there's clearly words. So language has progressed. And so there is, how does chronology affect the order and the application of the alphabet, of any alphabet? And again, when I say the alphabet, I'm kind of referencing this thing that hasn't been formalized yet, of this finalized, there's a set number of sounds, phonetics human beings can make, and there's structured order, which we've proven, and we're just literally tidying it up. If again, Science Club probably already has this down pat to a certain level behind closed doors, because I'm doing all of the stuff is effectively literally trivial, but this is like I told you, you go in someplace, you clean it all up, and then you walk out and no one ever notices you're there. Level of, that's the equivalent of mathematical proofing we're doing. And so how does time relate to the alphabet? Right, punctuality is timely. Punctuality, punctuation. Punctuation is truncation. Right? When do we use a period, a semicolon, a colon, a comma, right? So all of these different punctuations, right? Quantum field theory is never going to approach this. General relativity is never going to approach when you use these different forms. And geometric linguistics accounts for all of the different shapes. Right? Why does a colon? Why have we associated a colon to here comes a list? Why do we have 2 commas? Right? Why is it standard that you're taught 2 commas if you have a list of something, and it's 2 commas, then your third thing. Right? There's your one too many, formalized in language right now. And so punctuation is punctual, right? Punctuality is timing. And so we've now directly related timing to punctuation. And it obviously is, right? If I, yeah, right? Punctuation, there's a natural rhythm, right? Rhythm sets expectation. Like when we were saying our N-words at the beginning and I said neighbor, and you were definitely thinking something else, you naughty student out there. But punctuality is on time, synchronicity is in time. Right? If something is synchronized, they're moving concurrently. If they're punctual, they are on time. So now we've connected 2 words, synchronicity and punctuality, to this differentiating of the same type of saying with a different preposition. On time versus in time. Censorious, furious. Sensuality limits anger. Anger, angle. To dangle is to tempt. If you dangle a carrot in front of a horse, you're tempting it. To wrangle is to contain. I gotta get a handle on things. I gotta wrangle it in there. All right. Containing handles. Oh, I can handle this. Right? Oh, you got it? You sure? Yeah, I can handle it. Can you contain this situation of what's going on? Yeah, I got it. Curious, furious. Furious, velocity. Well, how does that connect? It does. Shut up. Velocity, velocitality. Sensorality is velocitality. So like I said, for the past 3 months, we've been purely in physical, in all of these fundamental physical ontology, mathematical ontology, linguistical ontology that you guys didn't know existed. But we're pairing all of these word forms, or these, these sequences of syllables. So what is vertical? Velocity is clearly linguistically related to verticality. So why? But what is vertical? Right? It's not horizontal. Right? And then horizontal and vertical are different than forward and backward depth. So that one too many, we have this kind of, again, that operation of 3 being dynamic, being open, living in 3 dimensions, what's going on there. But vertical, verticality, vertice, right? A vertex is a vertice. And so a vertex is a point. But it's not just a point. Like it's a point on the, like how does that relate to interior or exterior of the system? How does a reference frame play into this? From our geometry, if we have a point and it's a vertex, it's a polygon, we have a pentagon, and we're at that top point right here. It's a vertex. Is it inside or is it outside of the system? How do we define a boundary? Right? Physically, it's bonding. Mathematically, it is continuity. But a vertex is a point, but what kind of point is it? So a speciality is a kind, right? A species is a kind of life. And so a kind is a type. And that's just where my derivation finished up today. Again, if I don't provide you much explanation, the logic speaks for itself. And if you have any questions, I don't really care. So that is it for today. Thank you for watching, and I will see you on the next one.